Okay, welcome back. So we left off where we looked at inserting a row of data into our database. And we mentioned that when you insert something using db.exec, nothing is really returned except an error message. All right. So what happens if we want to find out what is the primary key or what is the insertion date? In other words, what if we want to find out all those things that were automatically created for us? Because remember, the primary key was automatically created for us. The insertion date was automatically added. So let's say we want to find out when we insert the row, what is the primary key? Okay. So we can do that. Okay. So there is this command in Postgres named returning. Okay, let me show you how that works. So let's say I want to insert, let me just manually insert a new quote. Okay, so I'm just going to say insert into quotations. Author name, the category, and the quote. Okay, and I want to insert values. Let's say Lao Tzu, and let's say life, and let's say the quote. Notice I'm using single quotes inside Postgres. The best fighter is never angry. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to do one thing here. Enter. I'm going to say returning. Okay, that's the command. Returning. What do I want to return? I want to return what was the quotation ID that was generated for me. Okay, if that's the one thing I want, I could put a semicolon. If I want also the insertion date, I could do that too. Okay, insertion date. Okay, and notice what happens. After it inserts the row, it returns these two pieces of data to me. What row was the ID, primary key, and what was the insertion date? And so now if I say select quotation ID from quotations, all right, that's right, we got quotation ID 3, which corresponds to the quote we just had, right? Okay, so that's just what we mean. So normally when you do an insert, all you're told is insert 1 or insert 2 or whatever, right? You're told how many rows are inserted. But if you want back information about that inserted row, then that's where the returning command comes in handy. Okay, so I showed you how it works. And so that brings us to our problem at hand. What if I want to find out what is the primary key or what is the insertion date that the system generated, that PostgreSQL generated. All right, because remember, our table has 5 columns, but we only need to pass in 3 columns because the other 2 are generated by Postgres. So let's say we wanted to find only the primary key for the row that was inserted. How would you do that? Okay, well, let's just do that. Okay. All right. So we're gonna keep our insert quote command, except we will have to say returning. Okay. And what do we want to return? We want to return only the quotation ID. Okay, quotation underscore ID. Okay. If I wanted to return the insertion date, I would have just put a comma and then insertion date. But for now, just return quotation ID. So that's the only thing I added to my previous SQL statement, this returning command. Now, we can't use exec anymore because remember exec doesn't return anything. So what we will have to use is db query row. Okay, what this does, it returns an actual information about the row that was inserted. Okay, however, we have a bit of error because it's telling me, okay, well, if I'm going to return something, okay, if I'm going to return a row, something about the row, well, I need to store the answer somewhere. Okay, so where do I store the answer? Okay, well, let's get rid of this. Okay, all right. And the way we actually specify where the answer is stored, it's a bit funky. So we just have to get used to it. Okay, what we have to do, we have to create a variable. Let's call it ID. Let's call it quotation ID. You can call it whatever you want, but quotation ID seems to make sense. Let's initialize it to 0, since we know primary keys begin with 1, right? So let's just initialize it with 0. And we will now tell Go that the answer that is returned by query row should be stored in this variable. And to do that, we're going to say that scan, and we simply pass in the address of the quotation ID. Okay. Of course, if I had insertion date, then I would have put comma, ampersand, insertion date. So for every variable that is returned, I need to have a variable to store it. And that many ampersands inside the scan function. So the scan function is just telling Go, okay, Go, I want you to take that value that is returned and store it here. Okay. Okay. So that's all we really need to do. Okay. So again, db query row. Okay. This is it. We pass it the same thing. We pass it the values, and then it returns a row, the information about the row. All right, so let's change our quote. Let's change it to something else, since I don't want the same quote twice. Let's just put this one, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Okay, even if it takes a million years. Okay, so that's our new code. Okay, and since this will be the primary key that is used by Postgres, let's try to print that out. Okay, so I could say fmt that print line the recently inserted record has quotation ID, and then we'll just put the answer as quotation ID. All right. Okay, so let's give this a run. Okay, so go run, go. Okay, and so it says the recently inserted record has quotation ID 4. And if we go back here, and if we select, we see that it does indeed has ID 4. Okay, so we are able to insert a row of data into Postgres from Go, and also ask for the primary key quotation ID to be returned. Okay. All right. So that's it for this video. So all I wanted to do was to show you how we could insert and also get some information back. All right. And to do that, we use the query row function. All right, which allows us to ask for columns from our inserted row. All right, so that's it. So now we can move on. Let's talk about how do we update a row that is already in the database. Sorry, in the database or in the table. I'll see you in that next video.